They don't fight for glory. They don't even fight for victory. They fight just to see another sunrise, if the sky isn't burning that day. In the far future, where humanity spans 1,000,000 worlds, the greatest war isn't fought by soldiers. It's fought by families, ordinary people, clinging to life in a universe that has forgotten mercy. This is their story, the untold struggle of survival in the grim darkness of war, in the endless wars of the 41st millennium. When the sky burns with the light of 1,000 dying stars and the ground trembles beneath the march of endless armies, it is not the soldiers who suffer the most, it is the ones left behind. Behind every victory claimed by the Imperium, behind every battle hymn sung in praise of the Emperor, there lies a story of pain that no one tells. It's the story of mothers waiting in silence, of children who no longer ask when their fathers will come home, of families who live in the ruins left behind by the endless hunger of war. The banners of the Imperium are soaked not only in the blood of enemies, but in the tears of the forgotten. Those who fight their own wars in kitchens, bunkers, and shattered streets. Every world in the Imperium is a battlefield, whether the guns are firing or not. Even on so-called civilized planets, the shadow of war is never far. Supplies are rationed, curfews are strict, and whispers of heresy or rebellion can mean death for an entire household. For the common family, survival is not about defeating the enemy, it's about enduring the cruelty of their own side. The administratum takes their food, the ecclesiarchy takes their faith, and the astra militarum takes their sons. The promise of protection is paid for with obedience and silence. When war comes, there are no choices, only orders. And the cost of disobedience is annihilation. In the ruins of bombed-out cities, mothers cradle children beneath flickering lights, praying that the next orbital bombardment misses their district. They whisper the Emperor's name, not out of devotion, but out of desperation. They don't understand the grand strategies of generals or the movements of fleets across the stars. All they know is the sound of distant thunder, the trembling of walls, and the constant fear that the next explosion will be closer. They hear the screams carried by the wind and wonder if those voices once belonged to someone they loved. Even when the warfront moves on, it never truly leaves. The land becomes poisoned, the rivers tainted, the sky heavy with ash. Crops wither, livestock die, and disease follows like a shadow. Families pick through the remains of their former homes, searching for scraps metal, food, anything that might be traded for survival. The lucky ones find a way to live near Imperial supply outposts, where rations are distributed under the watchful eyes of soldiers. But even there, danger never fades. A careless word against the Emperor can bring the Inquisition. A desperate act of theft can bring execution. In the Imperium, mercy is a forgotten concept, and ignorance is often the only protection. When conscription notices arrive, fathers and sons are torn away from their homes. There are no goodbyes, only orders and silence. Some families pretend to be proud, whispering that their loved ones will serve the Emperor. But deep inside they know the truth, most will never return. They will die nameless on some distant world, their blood feeding the endless machine of war. Those left behind must carry on, pretending that the sacrifice means something, that the Emperor truly watches over them. But in their hearts, doubt festers. They begin to wonder if their prayers are heard at all, or if the universe itself is deaf to human pain. Children grow up surrounded by the echoes of loss. They play among ruins, using broken lasguns as toys, imitating soldiers they've never met. They learn to fear the sound of dropships and the sight of uniforms. School lessons are filled with propaganda glorious victories, holy wars, the Emperor's eternal light. But the children see none of it in their daily lives. They see hunger. They see sickness. They see their mothers growing thinner each day, trading what little they have for ration cards or medicine that never comes. Some grow angry. Others grow numb. In this world, innocence doesn't last long. The war doesn't just take lives, it takes childhood itself. Faith becomes both weapon and wound. The ecclesiarchy preaches that suffering is holy, that every hardship is a test of loyalty. Families cling to this belief because the alternative, the idea that their pain is meaningless, is unbearable. So they light candles, build small shrines, and murmur the same prayers every night, even when their faith has already cracked. The irony is cruel. The more they suffer, the more they are told to be grateful. And so, generation after generation, they continue to believe, not because they see proof, but because hope is the only thing that hasn't been taken from them yet. In the quiet moments between bombings, between curfews and power outages, families share stories, not of heroes or saints, but of survival. How their ancestors endured hive collapses, tyrannid invasions, chaos cult purges, or orc raids. These stories are not told with pride, they are told with resignation, as if survival itself has become the only victory worth claiming. They measure life not in years, but in how many wars they've lived through. Each day becomes a small rebellion against the universe's indifference. Every Imperial victory broadcast across the Vox comes at a price no one counts. For every enemy slain, there are hundreds of civilians displaced, starved, or forgotten. The administratum records numbers, not lives. The soldiers return to new wars, but the families return to silence. There are no medals for endurance, no songs for those who rebuild what others destroy. And yet, without them, there would be nothing left to fight for. These nameless millions hold the Imperium together with their suffering, their faith, and their refusal to die quietly. The unseen suffering behind every Imperial victory is not just collateral damage, it is the foundation upon which the Imperium stands. Every fortress, every ship, every cathedral to the Emperor is built upon the backs of the forgotten. Their stories are never written in the archives. Their faces are never carved into statues. But they are the true cost of survival, the silent backbone of a civilization that claims to protect them while consuming them whole. They are the proof that in the grim darkness of the far future, the greatest war is not fought with weapons, it is endured by those who have nothing left but the will to live one more day. The cost of survival in the 41st millennium is not counted in credits or resources, it's counted in flesh, fear, and the fading fragments of humanity. For ordinary families, survival is not a choice, but an instinct carved into their bones. Each day begins not with hope, but with calculation. How to stretch one meal for 3 mouths, how to hide from patrols, how to avoid being noticed by anyone in authority. In the Imperium, to be seen is to be judged, and to be judged is often to be condemned. So families learn to make themselves invisible, moving like ghosts through their own cities, praying that the war machine will pass over them. Just one more day. There are no safe havens, not truly. Even planets far from the front lines are consumed by the demands of the endless conflict. Factories run without pause, their workers collapsing from exhaustion only to be replaced by others. Families are born and broken beneath the smoke-stained skies of Forge worlds, where the only lullaby children hear is the scream of machinery. Food is synthetic, air is filtered, and life expectancy is measured by output quotas. Yet even here, survival is worship. The weak die, the obedient endure, and the devout pray that their suffering will be seen as service. This is the quiet rhythm of existence under the Imperium, an unending labor where death is routine, and despair is sacred. On war-torn frontier worlds, the line between civilian and soldier fades. Families live in shattered shelters patched together from debris. The air smells of dust and gunpowder. The horizon burns with artillery fire. The nights are never silent. Distant bombardments echo like thunder, and the ground shakes with every impact. Water is more precious than faith, and food is found in whatever can crawl, grow, or be scavenged from the corpses of the fallen. People trade anything, jewelry, tools, even memories for a single can of nutrient paste. Disease spreads faster than bullets, and those who fall sick are left behind. Because mercy is a luxury the living cannot afford. Fathers who once worked in manufacturings now wield rusted rifles, conscripted to defend their settlements against enemies they don't understand. They fight not for ideology or honor, but for the scraps of life left behind. Mothers become medics, scavengers, protectors, their hands bloodied not from battle, but from tending to wounds that never heal. They know that the Imperium does not care if they live or die. They fight only because extinction would mean their children's names vanish into the void. Every decision becomes a gamble between survival and sacrifice, and the line between bravery and desperation disappears. The hunger never truly ends. Entire districts go without rations for weeks. Children's bellies swell from starvation, their eyes hollow and distant. The strong steal from the weak, and the weak pray to become invisible. Sometimes aid shipments arrive Imperial crates dropped from orbit, stamped with the Aquila, but by the time they hit the ground, they are already surrounded by chaos. People kill for bread, for water, for anything that can keep them breathing one more day. The soldiers tasked with maintaining order often turn their rifles on civilians, their patience shattered by exhaustion and madness. The Emperor's mercy is preached from loudspeakers, but his people die with empty hands. Faith becomes both a weapon and a chain. Families kneel before makeshift shrines, repeating sermons they barely believe. The ecclesiarchy tells them that suffering purifies, that their hunger honors the Emperor, that death is not the end, but a sacred offering. And so they endure. They whisper prayers over the dying, not because they expect salvation, but because silence would mean surrender. The belief that their pain has meaning is the only thing that keeps them from collapsing into despair. In their faith, they find fragments of strength, small enough to survive the night, fragile enough to break by dawn. Children grow into this world knowing nothing else. They learn to work before they can write, to scavenge before they can speak of dreams. Their toys are bullet casings. Their lullabies are the rumble of tanks. They do not cry when a family member disappears, because crying wastes energy. They do not ask where their fathers went, because the answer is always the same: to serve the Emperor. And in time, they too are fed into the machine of war. Their childhoods erased by the grind of duty. The cycle continues, generation after generation, until survival itself becomes tradition. Yet amid all this horror, there are sparks of defiance, small, almost invisible acts of rebellion against the universe's cruelty. A mother giving her child the last piece of bread. A father hiding a wounded deserter instead of turning him in. Neighbors sharing what little they have, knowing it might mean starvation tomorrow. These moments are not seen by historians or chroniclers. They will never be sung in hymns. But in them lies the true spirit of humanity, the will to live, not because of orders, but in spite of them. Every breath taken under the Imperium's shadow is an act of resistance. To survive in such a world is to defy extinction, to spit in the face of despair. Ordinary families, nameless and forgotten, are the foundation of a dying empire that feeds on their suffering. Their endurance is the reason the Imperium still stands, even as it rots from within. And though they may never see peace, their struggle keeps the faint ember of humanity alive in a galaxy consumed by darkness. The collapse of innocence and normalcy in the 41st millennium is not a sudden event, it's a slow decay. A steady unraveling of what it means to live, to love, to dream. On Imperial worlds, the concept of a peaceful childhood is a myth told in whispers. Something spoken of only by the old who still remember what before the war used to mean, though even they can no longer tell when the war truly began. It has always been there, lingering like a disease in the air, shaping the lives of the young before they can understand the world they were born into. In the Imperium, childhood doesn't end when you grow up, It ends the first time you see death and realize it means nothing. A child's first memory might be the sound of gunfire, or the tremor of an orbital bombardment. They learn to crawl among debris, to walk through ash, to sleep beneath the sound of sirens. The stars above are not symbols of wonder, but of threat, because every light in the sky could be a ship, and every ship could bring death. They are taught early that questions are dangerous. Why the wars happen, why the food is scarce, why their fathers never return. These questions are swallowed before they can be spoken. Obedience replaces curiosity. Fear becomes instinct. By the time they are 10, they have already learned to stop hoping for safety. On hive worlds, children grow up in shadows. They spend their days scavenging among the wreckage of forgotten technology, trading scraps for food, fighting other children for a chance at survival. The air tastes of metal and dust, and the sky, if they ever see it, is a dull smear of gray. They know the sound of Arbite's boots before they learn their prayers. Some join gangs to survive. Others are taken by press gangs or ecclesiarchy orphanages, where they are re-educated to serve the Emperor's will. The lucky ones find work in manufactorums, where they spend their lives assembling weapons they will never use. For wars they will never understand, there are no birthdays, no holidays, no laughter without consequence. Joy feels unnatural in a world that punishes it. Families who try to celebrate something, a child's survival, a small victory, even a good harvest, must do so in secret. Music is forbidden in some districts. Unsanctioned gatherings are heresy, and smiling too openly can invite suspicion. The Inquisition watches everything, and rumors alone can destroy a household. A neighbor's jealousy or a child's careless word can lead to an entire family being dragged away in the night. The message is clear: trust no one, love quietly, and never draw attention to your happiness. The children who are not conscripted into labor or faith often end up in the guard. Recruiters come without warning, lines of armored trucks rolling into towns, Vox speakers blaring hymns of duty and sacrifice. Boys and girls alike are chosen at random, told they are blessed to serve. Parents are forbidden to protest. Some try to hide their children, but the penalty for resistance is execution. Those taken are never seen again, except in the propaganda reels that speak of heroes of the Imperium. The reality is different. They are trained, broken, and thrown into wars that consume them faster than they can be replaced. On agricultural worlds, innocence dies in quieter ways. The soil itself is poisoned by centuries of neglect, the seasons twisted by the machines of war. Families till fields filled with bones, their harvests feeding soldiers on distant planets while their own children starve. When raiders or Xenos forces strike, they are left defenseless. The Imperium's protection always promised, never delivered. Survivors bury their dead and rebuild, again and again, until grief becomes routine. The children learn early that the galaxy is not fair, that the Emperor's light shines brightest on those far away, and that their lives mean little beyond the yield of their crops. Some young ones turn to faith, others to despair. Those raised in the ecclesiarchy's orphanages are taught to worship pain as virtue. They kneel for hours on cold stone floors, reciting prayers until their voices bleed. The priests tell them that joy is corruption, that comfort breeds heresy, that their suffering pleases the Emperor. In time, they begin to believe it. They look at the scars on their hands and see holiness, not harm. The line between devotion and indoctrination disappears, and by adulthood, they no longer remember what happiness feels like. They become living statues, obedient, hollow, unbreakable, but not all lose themselves completely. Some hold on to fragments, a memory of laughter, a lullaby from a mother long gone, the smell of rain before the skies turn toxic. These fragments become precious treasures, passed from one generation to the next like relics. They remind them that once humanity was capable of softness, that once A child could run through a field without fear. That once, love did not need to hide. These memories are fragile, fading faster each century, but they still survive, buried deep beneath layers of propaganda and fear. For the Imperium, innocence is a weakness. It breeds compassion, and compassion breeds rebellion. So it is crushed early, replaced by faith and fear. The people learn to see death not as tragedy, but as duty. They are told that to suffer is to serve, that to die is to be redeemed. In such a world, normalcy no longer exists. The family home becomes a bunker. The dinner table becomes an altar. Every day becomes a ritual of survival, silent, grim, unending. The laughter of children, when it exists at all, sounds out of place, like a memory that the universe itself is trying to forget. And so, generation after generation, the cycle continues. Newborns open their eyes to a world already broken, where innocence is not stolen, it is never allowed to exist. The galaxy offers no safe spaces, no gentle beginnings. From the moment of birth, they belong to the Imperium, body, soul, and memory. And though they may never understand what peace means, their eyes still hold traces of something ancient, something forbidden, the faint, flickering shadow of what humanity used to be. Faith becomes the only light in the darkness, the last fragile thread that keeps ordinary people from falling into madness. In the endless suffering of the 41st millennium, belief is no longer a choice, it is a necessity, a weapon, and a chain all at once. The Imperium of man demands absolute devotion to the God Emperor, and for billions of families scattered across dying worlds, that devotion is the only thing standing between despair and oblivion. When everything around them collapses, when the sky burns, when loved ones vanish, when hope itself turns to ash, faith becomes the one thing that cannot be taken by force. In the slums of hive cities, entire communities gather on makeshift altars built from scrap metal and candles melted into rusted plates. They chant hymns they barely remember, their voices trembling with exhaustion and hunger. The priests speak of salvation, of the emperor's watchful gaze. But the people don't pray for miracles. They pray for one more day of survival. For the disease to spare their children. For the patrols to pass their homes without notice. The sermons echo through broken streets like the beating of a dying heart, steady and desperate. They kneel not because they are pure, but because standing up against the universe feels impossible. Faith is taught before language. Children learn to make the sign of the Aquila before they learn to write their names. Mothers whisper prayers while feeding their infants, hoping the emperor hears them, even through the dust and smoke that fill the air. They tell stories of saints and martyrs who endured great suffering, not as tales of glory, but as reminders that endurance itself is divine. The message is clear. Pain is sacred, obedience is survival, doubt is death. By the time a child reaches adulthood, faith has become part of their very identity, not because they truly understand it, but because it's the only thing that makes the cruelty of life bearable. In remote farming settlements, priests travel from village to village, carrying the emperor's word and little else. They arrive like ghosts, faces hidden beneath hoods, their sermons carried by wind and static. They bless the dying, condemn the heretical, and remind the people that every hardship is a test of loyalty. The farmers bow their heads, repeating the prayers even as their fields rot, their wells dry, and their children starve. When questioned why they still believe, they give the same answer every time: because without faith, we have nothing left. In some corners of the Imperium, faith burns bright enough to blind. The ecclesiarchy encourages fanaticism, teaching that heresy lurks in every shadow. Entire families turn against neighbors for speaking the forbidden word or failing to attend worship. The purity of belief becomes a weapon, dividing communities and turning love into suspicion. A husband denounces his wife for questioning a priest's sermon. A mother reports her son to the Arbites for doubting a miracle. Each act of betrayal is cloaked in righteousness. They tell themselves it is holy, that it protects the Imperium. But deep down they know it is fear, the fear of what happens when faith falters, when the Emperor's light no longer shines on them. And yet, for all its cruelty, faith also gives them strength. It becomes a shield against the despair that would otherwise consume them. When the bombs fall and the world shakes, they clutch their relics and recite their verses. When loved ones are lost to war or disease, they light candles and whisper, "He watches." It doesn't matter whether they truly believe he does. The act of believing itself becomes enough, a quiet defiance against a universe that wants them broken. The Emperor may be silent, but the echo of his name is the rhythm that keeps hearts beating in the dark. There are stories told of miraculous survivals, a family spared during a bombardment, a child healed of sickness, a lost soldier finding his way home. The priests call these signs of divine favor, proof that the Emperor still guides his people. Whether these stories are real or not no longer matters. They spread through the settlements like sparks in the void, giving people a reason to keep going. A starving mother clings to the tale of a saint who once turned ashes into bread. A dying father prays to see his daughter safe, even as his vision fades. Faith turns grief into purpose and suffering into meaning. In truth, many no longer believe in salvation, but they continue to act as though they do. They build shrines in the corners of their homes, carved from bones and old machine parts. They mark the walls with holy symbols, hoping it will keep away the horrors that crawl through the night. They share bread before meals, whispering thanks to a God who never answers. These small rituals give structure to chaos, a rhythm to the meaningless. In a galaxy without mercy, even false hope becomes sacred. There are those who lose their faith completely, who stare at the devastation around them and see only silence. They curse the Emperor, curse the priests, curse the endless lies. But even then, they find that faith is not something you can truly escape. It lingers like a scar that refuses to fade. In their darkest moments, even the faithless find themselves whispering his name, not out of belief, but out of instinct. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, there is no room for disbelief. To live without faith is to face the abyss alone, and most are too tired, too broken, too human to do that. So they keep praying. They keep believing, not because they expect an answer, but because the act itself is what keeps them alive. Faith is their fire in the void, dim, fragile, flickering, but still burning. It is the only light left to those who have lost everything else. The last whisper of humanity in a universe that has forgotten what mercy means. Children growing up among ruins and despair in the 41st millennium inherit a world that has already surrendered its warmth. For them, ruins are not symbols of the past, they are home. Crumbled stone walls, rusted machinery, and hollowed-out cathedrals serve as their playgrounds and shelters. The smell of smoke and oil is the scent of life itself. They do not dream of green fields or blue skies, because such things only exist in myths told by dying elders. Their lullabies are the echo of distant gunfire and the low hum of industrial machines that never sleep. They are born into decay, and decay becomes their cradle. In every hive, on every war-torn planet, the laughter of children sounds unnatural, fragile, out of place in a world where hope has been outlawed. When they smile, it's not because they are happy, but because they've learned that smiling hides fear. They grow up fast, too fast, learning the rules of survival before they learn kindness. They know when to speak and when silence can save their lives. They know how to avoid the gaze of soldiers, how to hide from patrols, and how to scavenge among the corpses without looking twice. Childhood in the Imperium is not an age, it's a brief illusion that fades the moment reality sets in. Many are orphans before they can even say the word. War, disease, and famine tear families apart, leaving children to fend for themselves. Some are taken by the Schola Progenium, molded into servants of the Imperium, commissars, clerics, or soldiers who will one day enforce the same cruelty that shaped them. Others simply vanish, lost to the chaos of the streets, their names forgotten. They form packs to survive, small groups bound by desperation rather than love. They steal, they fight, they learn to kill. To them, morality is a luxury of the dead. Every scrap of food, every sip of water, every stolen coat is a victory against extinction. In the lower levels of hive cities, children breathe air thick with chemicals and ash. The light that reaches them is filtered through miles of metal and filth, turning everything a sickly shade of gold. They navigate labyrinths of pipes and tunnels, their small hands calloused from climbing jagged metal. The walls are covered in faded propaganda, promises of glory, images of the Emperor's face, but they do not see hope in them. To them, the Emperor is just another watcher, one more authority that never speaks, but always demands obedience. They hear the preachers shouting about salvation, but all they can think about is the gnawing hunger in their stomachs. On frontier worlds, children learn to dig trenches before they learn to read. They help carry ammunition, fetch water, or bury the dead. Some are given mock weapons to practice with, training for the future, as their elders call it. But deep down, everyone knows the truth. Their future is already written. They will grow up to fight, to die, or to disappear into the machinery of war like everyone else. When an explosion rips through a nearby settlement, they do not scream. They listen. The sound of destruction is their calendar, the rhythm that marks their days. Some try to play among the wreckage, pretending that the skeletons of tanks and the shells of old buildings are toys. They climb on fallen statues of saints and turn empty helmets into masks. But even their games mirror the world around them. Mock battles, pretend executions, scavenger hunts for scraps of food. They laugh, but the laughter is hollow, echoing off dead walls like a ghost's cry. They learn early that fun is fleeting, and that nothing they touch truly belongs to them. Everything, every toy, every moment, every breath, can be taken at any time. There are moments, rare and fleeting, when innocence breaks through. A child finds a wild flower growing through cracks in the stone and stares at it in awe. Another shares a crust of bread with a friend instead of keeping it. A group of orphans hums a song they half remember from their mothers. These moments shine like sparks in the void, too small to change anything, but bright enough to remind the universe that humanity isn't completely gone. But the world is merciless. Sooner or later, those sparks are crushed under the weight of survival. Faith plays a cruel role in their upbringing. Priests tell them that their suffering is holy, that every pain is a step toward the Emperor's light. The children nod, repeating the words like echoes, not out of belief but habit. They watch as the sick die despite the prayers, as the faithful starve despite their devotion. The lessons they learn are harsh. Faith doesn't feed you, kindness doesn't save you, and the Emperor's light doesn't reach the lower levels of the hive. And yet, even so, they keep praying, not because they believe it will change their world, but because it gives shape to their silence. Some are taken by warbands, raised as soldiers before they hit puberty. They are given weapons heavier than their arms, taught to kill without hesitation. Others are used as servants or test subjects in the name of science, faith, or survival. Their childhoods are erased so thoroughly that by the time they reach adulthood, they no longer remember ever being children. They become the same hardened faces that once frightened them, continuing the cycle without question. And then there are those who break, children whose minds can no longer bear the constant fear and death. They wander through ruins in silence, eyes blank, souls hollowed out by trauma. Some vanish into the wastelands. Others are found by inquisitorial patrols and purified for showing signs of madness. Their names are forgotten, their stories buried. But their ghosts linger in the ruins, whispering reminders of what innocence used to sound like. In the end, every child of the Imperium learns the same truth. Hope is not given, it is stolen. piece by piece, from the jaws of despair. They grow up knowing that the world will never be kind, that their dreams will never come true, and that love, when it exists, must be hidden to survive. Yet somehow, impossibly, some still find the will to go on. They hold on to fragments of memory, a smile, a song, a promise, and carry them through the darkness like torches that refuse to die. Because even in a galaxy built on suffering, even in the heart of ruin, the faint heartbeat of childhood still dares to echo, weak, trembling, but unbroken. Asterisk, the tyranny of the Imperium and blind obedience shape every breath of life in the 41st millennium. For ordinary families, it is not an empire of protection. It is an empire of control, built on fear, faith, and silence. The Imperium does not govern through love or trust. It rules through the weight of a billion laws, each written in blood. To live under its shadow is to understand that mercy no longer exists, that freedom is a forgotten relic of humanity's past. The people are not citizens. They are fuel souls to be burned in the name of the Emperor's endless war. From the moment of birth, every person belongs to the Imperium. Their lives are catalogued, their labor assigned, their faith monitored. The Imperial Creed dictates every action, every thought, every word that can be safely spoken. Families cannot choose where they live, whom they serve, or what they believe. Even their deaths are not their own. Their bodies belong to the machine, their souls to the church, and their children to the state. The administratum counts them not as people, but as numbers, as quotas to be filled. To question an order is heresy. To refuse it is treason. And in the Imperium, both are punishable by death. The tyranny begins quietly, disguised as devotion. Every home has an icon of the Emperor, every street a shrine. Priests preach of purity and obedience while the Arbites watch from the shadows, ensuring no one listens too closely, no one thinks too freely. The sermons are filled with promises that loyalty brings protection, that faith brings purpose. But the truth is far darker. The only reward for obedience is survival, and even that is never guaranteed. Families bow not out of love, but out of fear. They know that one wrong word, one whispered doubt, can doom an entire bloodline. The Inquisition's reach is endless. Its agents appear without warning, faceless behind masks of authority. They ask questions no one dares to answer, searching for heresy where there may be none. A single accusation, even from a child, can lead to an entire district being purged. People learn to police their own thoughts, to erase any sign of doubt before it can be seen. Mothers scold their children for curiosity. Fathers whisper prayers instead of opinions. The people of the Imperium become their own jailers, building cages in their minds long before the Arbites come to build them in stone. Propaganda fills every corner of life. Loudspeakers blare hymns of loyalty. Banners hang from crumbling buildings, proclaiming devotion to the Emperor and the purity of mankind. Every victory is glorified, every failure blamed on heresy. Schools teach not knowledge, but obedience. Children learn that questioning authority is the first step toward corruption, that truth itself is dangerous if it does not align with doctrine. History is rewritten daily, twisted to suit the needs of the ruling faith. Generations grow up knowing nothing but submission, believing that their suffering is divine will, that their silence is sacred duty. The tyranny of the Imperium is not loud, it is methodical. It does not need to shout to be obeyed. The people enforce it upon themselves, because fear has become part of their blood. Families betray one another to survive. Neighbors report neighbors, not out of malice, but because they've been taught that loyalty demands it. A father may turn in his own son for speaking against a priest, believing it to be an act of love, a way to save his child's soul before the Inquisition takes it. The cruelty of the system lies not only in its punishments, but in how deeply it convinces its victims that obedience is salvation. And still, the taxes come, the conscriptions never end. When the Imperial Guard arrives, They take whoever can hold a weapon. When the tithes are due, they take food, fuel, flesh, whatever is demanded. Families watch their loved ones disappear into transports, never to return. The soldiers who survive often come back as strangers, broken, hollow, unable to speak of what they've seen. But no one dares to ask. No one dares to show grief. The Imperium tolerates tears only when shed for the Emperor. To mourn privately is seen as weakness, to question loss is heresy. Even the act of dying is bound by tyranny. The bodies of the dead are burned in massive pyres, their ashes scattered as offerings to the machine. Funerals are rare. Grief is a waste of time. The priests tell the living that their loved ones serve a greater purpose now, their souls feeding the Emperor's eternal flame. It is a comforting lie, repeated so often it becomes truth. To doubt it would mean death, and so the people choose to believe. Even when they no longer feel faith, some families try to resist in small ways, a whispered prayer that isn't sanctioned, a secret story about what life was like before the wars, a hidden relic of the past that speaks of freedom. These acts are small, fragile things, but in a world where obedience is everything, they are acts of rebellion. They remind people that they are still human, even if the Imperium no longer treats them as such. But resistance is always temporary. Eventually, the eyes of the Imperium find them. The priests come. The soldiers follow. The shrines are burned, the families disappear. And the silence returns. The greatest cruelty of the Imperium is not in its executions or its purges, but in how thoroughly it convinces people that this is normal, that suffering is love, that obedience is strength, that death is grace. Entire generations are born, live, and die without ever realizing they were slaves. And yet, even in this endless machinery of tyranny, there are moments, fleeting, dangerous moments, where someone dares to think, what if this isn't how it has to be? That thought, fragile and forbidden, is the most dangerous heresy of all. The quiet heroism of common people often goes unnoticed in the grim expanse of the 41st millennium. In a galaxy where gods walk among men and armies of a billion clash in endless wars, it is easy to overlook the small, fragile lives that keep the Imperium running. Yet, it is within these ordinary souls, miners, farmers, mothers, healers, and laborers that true courage burns brightest. Their bravery isn't forged in battlefields of glory, but in the unseen moments where survival itself becomes an act of rebellion. These are people who wake before the first siren of dawn. Their hands already blistered, their lungs filled with the dust of a dying world. They do not wield chainswords or wear power armor. They wield faith, endurance, and love. Every meal they share, every prayer they whisper, every time they choose to keep going despite knowing the odds, they perform quiet miracles. In a universe that demands obedience, simply living is defiance. On countless worlds, entire generations live under the shadow of imperial industry. The air is thick with ash, the ground poisoned by centuries of war and exploitation. Children are born into hunger, into labor, into fear. And yet, they laugh. They find moments of joy between the cracks of despair, a mother humming a lullaby beneath the roar of engines, a father carving small toys out of scrap metal for his child, a group of friends sharing stolen rations under a flickering light. These moments are small, almost invisible, but in the universe of Warhammer40K, they are acts of heroism that defy the very nature of existence. Some work in the manufactorums, toiling beside roaring machines that never stop. The air there tastes of oil and metal, and every shift could be their last. Workers lose limbs, sight, and hope, yet the forges never cease. Still, they keep working, not because they love the Imperium, but because they love their families. Because a single missed quota can mean starvation for those waiting at home. Their endurance is not rewarded, their pain not recognized, but still they endure. In every drop of sweat, lies a story of sacrifice no scribe will ever record. There are mothers who stand in line for hours just to receive a ration that barely feeds their children. There are fathers who lie to their families, telling them they've been assigned to safer posts, when in truth they've been conscripted for wars they'll never return from. There are children who learn to pray before they can read, because prayer is the only comfort their world allows. They live in constant fear of disease, of hunger, of the Imperium's judgment, but they never stop trying. Their will to protect one another is the last spark of humanity left in a civilization, drowning in darkness. Not all heroes carry weapons. Some carry secrets. In the ruins of forgotten cities, small pockets of resistance survive, not through violence, but through memory. They tell stories of what life once was, of blue skies, green fields, oceans untouched by war. These tales are forbidden, dangerous even, for they remind people that there was once something worth fighting for. But these storytellers speak anyway, knowing that words can be stronger than steel. That hope, though fragile, is the one thing the Imperium cannot fully destroy. There are medics who patch up soldiers without question, using scraps and prayers to keep the dying alive just long enough to see another sunrise. There are teachers who risk their lives to teach real knowledge, smuggling banned books and whispering truths to the next generation. There are priests who dare to preach compassion instead of fear, knowing that at any moment the Inquisition might call them heretic. Their courage is silent but profound, and it ripples through the hearts of those who still listen. Even in the heart of war zones, the quiet heroism continues. When bombardments reduce cities to rubble, it is not soldiers who first move through the smoke. It is the common people, searching for survivors, pulling strangers from the fire, sharing their last sip of water. They do not do it for medals or recognition. They do it because the instinct to help, to protect, to care, has not yet been extinguished. It is the purest form of resistance in a world that worships death, and there are moments brief, fleeting, when their courage changes everything. A factory worker who hides a wounded soldier from the authorities. A young girl who carries messages through war-torn streets to reunite families. A mother who gives up her food so her children can live one more day. These are not acts that shape empires or win wars, but they are the threads that hold what remains of humanity together. They are the light that flickers, stubbornly, against the endless dark dot in the grand tapestry of the Imperium. These people are invisible. Their names will never be carved into stone. The history books will never mention them. To the priests and generals, they are statistic souls counted, bodies replaced. But to those who live and die beside them, they are the reason the galaxy hasn't yet fallen into complete madness. Because even in a universe that has forgotten mercy, there are still those who remember what it means to be human. Their strength does not lie in defiance, but in compassion. Their power is not in rebellion, but in endurance. They are the heartbeat of a dying empire, the proof that even in the grim darkness of the far future, humanity refuses to completely fade away. The question, how long can humanity endure this nightmare, is one that echoes through the endless corridors of the 41st millennium. Unanswered and perhaps unanswerable. Every world, every hive city, every desolate outpost of the Imperium of Man bears silent witness to this question. It's etched into the cracked stone of ruined cathedrals, whispered in the prayers of the dying, and carried in the hollow eyes of those who have seen too much. Humanity has survived 10,000 years of unending war, yet the cost has been the slow erosion of its own soul. How long can something endure when survival itself demands the death of everything that once made it human? There was a time when humanity dreamed of peace, of progress, of reaching the stars to build something greater. But those dreams have long since turned to dust. The stars that once symbolized hope now burn cold, their light swallowed by the shadow of the Imperium's iron rule. Worlds once lush and fertile are now stripped bare, their oceans drained, their skies choked with smoke. On each of these worlds, people cling to existence, not because they believe things will get better, but because there is no other choice. Survival has become instinct, not hope. In the hive cities, where billions are stacked like layers of rot, endurance is measured in breaths. The air is poison, the food synthetic, the light artificial and unkind. Entire generations live and die without ever seeing the sky. Yet, they persist. They work, they pray, they love, they grieve, all beneath the unblinking eyes of the ecclesiarchy and the administratum. They've learned to numb themselves to horror, to bury emotion deep enough that it doesn't interfere with the will to keep going. It is not courage that keeps them alive, it is habit, carved into their DNA through centuries of oppression. And yet, there are still moments when humanity shows flickers of what it once was. A mother holding her starving child close, whispering promises she knows she can't keep. A worker sharing a crust of bread with a stranger. A dying soldier smiling as he remembers the laughter of his family one last time. These are tiny fragments of light in the endless void, reminders that something within refuses to die, no matter how much the universe tries to crush it. But even these sparks fade, one by one, as generations forget what it means to dream. On war-torn worlds, endurance takes another form. Entire populations live beneath constant bombardment, rebuilding the same cities over and over after each invasion. The soil itself is soaked in blood older than memory. Children grow up learning how to run at the sound of artillery, how to dig through rubble for food, how to stay silent when the soldiers pass. For them, survival is not a choice, it is the only story they've ever known. The galaxy has taken everything from them, except the one thing it cannot take, the primal, stubborn will to live. But every act of survival comes with a cost. To endure the nightmare of the 41st millennium, people have had to become something else. Compassion fades when food is scarce. Morality erodes when the difference between life and death depends on obedience. Humanity survives, yes, but not as it once was. It becomes harder, colder, more machine than flesh, more doctrine than soul. The Imperium's tyranny has not just broken bodies, it has reshaped minds. In the effort to survive, humanity has slowly transformed into something that no longer remembers why it fought so hard to exist in the first place. There are whispers. Among the older generations, those few who remember, stories passed down from before the endless. Wars that maybe it would be better to let it all end. To let the fires of the galaxy burn out, to finally rest. But even that thought is heresy. The Imperium demands endurance. The priests say that to die is to fail the Emperor, that to stop fighting is to betray his will. And so the people keep going, not out of faith, not out of hope, but out of fear of what will happen if they stop. Humanity endures because it is too afraid not to. And so this cycle continues. Worlds burn, billions die, and yet new generations rise to take their place. They are told the same lies, given the same prayers, and sent to the same wars. The nightmare renews itself endlessly, fueled by belief, by fear, by inertia. Humanity becomes its own warden, locking itself in a prison it built millennia ago. The walls close tighter with every passing century, and still, the species clings to life ragged, scarred and hollow-eyed, but alive. How long can it last? No one knows. The records of the Imperium stretch back for 10,000 years, but no record has ever shown peace. Every year, more of humanity's essence is consumed by the machines of war and faith. Yet somehow, impossibly, the species persists. Perhaps it is not strength that keeps humanity alive, but stubbornness, the refusal to vanish, even when there is nothing left to live for. Perhaps endurance itself has become humanity's curse. There may come a day when the light finally dies, when the last human breath fades beneath the silence of a dead galaxy. But until that moment arrives, humanity will continue to endure, not because it believes in salvation, but because it has forgotten how to stop suffering. In the grim darkness of the far future, that is all that remains.